When Hitler triumphed in the summer of 1940, cheered by the Germans, his people saw him as an infallible genius, gifted with extraordinary intelligence. But that's an image that was completely fabricated.
The myth of Hitler sold to the Germans is that of the Führer who knows everything, works day and night, whose office light never goes out. It's the exact opposite of reality. Hitler is a dilettante, he never really works, he's someone who's never worked. He can stand long-term intellectual effort, could read a file over 20 pages. Hitler doesn't work.
Actually, Hitler likes to retreat to his hideaway, like an artist floating above reality. A handful of associates do the work for him. Their names are Joseph Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler, or Albert Speer. It took Hitler over 15 years to recruit them.
Today we'd say he was a good HR manager. He surrounded himself well, choosing companions who always brought him something extra.
Who are these men in Hitler's shadow? What role does each one play? Around the Führer, there's a vast network of collaborators. First, there's the inner circle, the only ones with direct access to him. Among his loyal followers, an essential trio formed, with the first being Hermann Göring. He's an ogre, only interested in getting rich. Greedy, opportunistic, addicted to drugs. He loves luxury and extravagance. The second, Joseph Goebbels, is a failed writer. His leg disability makes him insecure. He takes revenge through radical hatred. He lives only through his idol, Hitler. The third, Heinrich Himmler, is a petty bourgeois, cold, narrow-minded, meticulous, a bland man who would become the century's murderer by organizing what the Nazis called the final solution. The second circle is made up of younger, more ambitious men who joined Hitler in the 1930s when he came to power and handed out ministries. Among them, Albert Speer would rise to the top. Behind the appearance of a distinguished architect, he's actually a master manipulator who shares Hitler's megalomaniac dreams, willing to do anything to become his favorite. Finally, at the bottom of the ladder, there are the field operatives, the Third Reich officials who commit crimes and atrocities, like Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau, totally cold and contemptuous. This family man, living with his wife and 5 kids in a house on the edge of the camp, would organize the extermination of 1.1 million people. By his side, Dr. Joseph Mengele. He's in charge of medical experiments. He embodies Nazi cruelty. With no mercy for his victims, this SS doctor performed the worst mutilations in the camps, even on children. Without them, the worst crimes wouldn't have been possible. To please Hitler, they're in competition.
Around Hitler, they all hate each other. That's actually how this little community works. Encouraged by Hitler, who stirs up rivalries, competition, and rivalry.
Hitler and the apostles of evil Hitler, still unknown, would recruit his accomplices in the early 1920s in a deeply troubled Germany. The losers of World War I were left with an army reduced to 100,000 men. So everywhere, former soldiers still formed mercenary groups. The country feared slipping into civil war. In this crowd, a small group from southern Germany chose the swastika as their symbol. They're called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. born in Munich. This small party attracted workers and the unemployed. In the front row, Hitler, 30, a low-level army employee, was in T, yet its leader. He was only its 55th member. This World War I veteran had seen combat at the front as a simple corporal. Since the defeat, all he thought about was avenging Germany. Hitler quickly established himself as the leader of the small party by speaking in Munich's beer halls. He denounced the humiliations inflicted on his country, but his means were still very limited. Set up in this back room of a beer hall, here's his first office. He wrote his speeches on this modest corner of a table. To get more attention, Hitler needed more prestigious representatives. In the fall of 1922, when a notable came to hear him, he felt he'd found the ideal candidate.
Hitler was really overjoyed because he said, "See, now we've got someone wealthy, a war hero. That's the kind of propaganda we need. That's someone we absolutely need as a member of our party."
The new recruit had a certain flair. Hermann Göring, 27, had been a fighter pilot during the Great War. In combat in the skies, he shot down 21 planes. Hermann Göring was even awarded the Pour le Mérite, the Army's highest honor for his bravery.
They were practically the only heroes German propaganda put forward. They made postcards, and pretty much everyone in Germany knew about the exploits of this or that officer. That's why Göring was someone really well known, with medals. He was really a character at that time.
After the war, since the German Air Force was dissolved, he was unemployed. But to Hitler, Göring had another advantage. He had high-level connections.
Göring brought him prestige and a huge social network.
The flying ace married a wealthy woman. Karin von Fock came from Swedish nobility. They met at her family's castle near Stockholm. The couple mingled with aristocrats, and Hitler needed donors to fund his little movement. As soon as he joined the party, Göring was immediately put in charge of the armed militia, called the SA. Less than a year later in Munich, the Nazi Party tried to seize power in a coup. During this November 1923 putsch, a shootout broke out between the Nazis and the police. "16 people were killed. For the Nazis, it was a total failure. Hitler was locked up for 8 months in Landsberg Fortress prison. His party was dissolved. In his cell, he wrote, "Mein Kampf." In French, "My struggle." Seriously wounded by a bullet, Göring was on the run. He was banned from German soil. He needed surgery and was treated with morphine for the pain. He became addicted to drugs. Göring took refuge in Stockholm, his wife's country. Jobless, with no future, he had violent outbursts.
It gave him a mental breakdown. And once he became a bit hard to handle, his wife decided it was best to put him in an asylum for treatment.
Göring spent several stays in this psychiatric hospital near Stockholm. According to his confidential medical file, he was admitted for morphine poisoning. Göring was described as suicidal and egocentric. He explained his mental troubles because he saw himself as politically dead. But the next year, he rose from the ashes. Thanks to the 1925 presidential election, an amnesty was just declared. He was allowed to return to Germany. Without his Führer, Göring was nothing. He hoped to get his leadership role back in the party. But things weren't the same with Hitler anymore.
At first, Hitler wasn't really keen on seeing his ex-SA chief again, because now he had a new SA leader.
So Göring reminded Hitler of all the things he'd done for him.
He said, "I've lost everything. I was always your most loyal collaborator, so now it's your turn to show me a little gratitude."
Hitler needed devoted men, so he found Göring a new role. Göring wouldn't fight in the streets anymore. Now he had to win over high society. He fought to regain his status. He only succeeded in 1928, when he entered the Reichstag, the German parliament, elected among the first 12 Nazi deputies. In 1932, he even became president of that assembly. The second accomplice Hitler recruited saw his Nazi career take off at age 29. Hitler started by giving Joseph Goebbels a very delicate mission. He sent him to Berlin, the capital of Germany. With its 4 million inhabitants, it was then the largest metropolis in Europe. It was made up of huge suburbs, packed with workers. It was nicknamed Red Berlin because the communists had made it their stronghold. Hitler gave a huge challenge to this little limping man. Make the Nazis the top political force in Berlin, and the Führer knew he could ask Goebbels for anything.
He's a man desperately hungry for recognition, starving for it. He found it in Hitler, whom he saw as charismatic, intelligent, superior, and for whom he developed an almost romantic attachment. He was truly emotionally dependent on Hitler, always seeking his approval, friendly gestures and kind words.
Goebbels owed everything to Hitler, because until they met, his life was just one failure after another. Sick as a small child, Goebbels was left with a leg disability. He was ashamed of it. During World War I, he dreamed of becoming a soldier. To explain his disability, he preferred to lie.
He hid his handicap by saying, "I was wounded in the Great War. I'm a hero of the Great War." But he never fought in the Great War, simply because he was never drafted.
A PhD in literature, a failed writer, he never found a job that matched his ambitions. Goebbels worked for 9 months as a low-level bank clerk before quitting. Only Hitler gave his life meaning.
So he was no longer the little bank clerk, no longer the failed writer rejected by big publishers. Now he was the Nazi party chief for a pretty important area, the capital of the Reich.
When he arrived in Berlin, the new boss found only about 100 active members and a few tiny offices. Everything had to be built from scratch. Goebbels started by creating a newspaper, Langriff. The Attack, in English. And to get people talking about the Nazis, he chose a radical strategy: stir up hatred. Less than a week after arriving, Goebbels sent his thugs to challenge the communists in their neighborhood. Violent fights broke out, and there were mass arrests. The police banned the Nazi Party in the Reich capital. But Goebbels didn't care. The movement thrived on scandal. In this violent climate, Nazi propaganda found itself a martyr. In 1930, a young activist, Horst Wessel, was stabbed to death by a communist. With Hitler and Göring present, this lavish funeral gave the Nazis a chance for an impressive show of strength. And Goebbels kept pouring fuel on the fire.
Did he really deserve to die? How brave he was to march through the storm, that young German worker, upright and proud.
To reward him, Hitler gave Goebbels a promotion. He named him party propaganda chief. The third man in Hitler's inner circle didn't fit the usual profile of workers and unemployed who joined the Nazis. Heinrich Himmler was a young bourgeois, obsessed with the superiority of the Germanic race. At party headquarters in Munich, in this 1929 propaganda film, Himmler is the young man with glasses. He still looked like a low-level secretary, taking orders from his boss. The others didn't see his ambitions. Himmler came from a good Catholic family, perfectly integrated into society. His father was a Latin and Greek teacher who became principal of one of the city's top high schools. He lacked nothing, but very young, he joined the most radical racist groups. Catherine Himmler is the granddaughter of Ernst, Heinrich Himmler's youngest brother. This political scientist studies her family's history. All three Himmler brothers became rabid Nazis.
Their ideology was rooted in a sense of superiority, the feeling that the German people were above the rest.
This racist rhetoric also promoted a return to the land. Himmler became an agricultural engineer. With his wife Marga, they bought a small farm where they wanted to live self-sufficiently, to protect themselves from the outside world they saw as rotten. Next to Hitler, Himmler acted submissive, but he also had real influence over him.
In fact, we now know he stood up for his own beliefs. He often got Hitler's approval for ideas that were his own.
Himmler, the young bourgeois, believed in Nazi ideas, but he didn't like mixing with the rank and file who made up the party's core.
To Himmler, these people were brainless idiots. It was like a fan club, like Lazio or PSG at their wildest.
In response, Himmler created an elite club within the party. These disciplined men in black would form an elite under his command. The name of this unit in German was made up of two letters, the SS. All of them had to be of pure Germanic origin. They would be the most fanatical of the fanatics. When, on that night in 1933, Adolf Hitler was named Chancellor of Germany, once again, he didn't want to work as his role required.
He really hated being forced to work every day from 9 to 5. For him, that was unthinkable. When he started, so to speak, his chancellor career, after just a few days, he immediately insisted that it wasn't his job to work.
Once in power, dividing up the roles among his accomplices creates winners and losers. Goebbels doesn't become a minister right away. As for Göring, he comes out on top. Hitler brings him into his first government as early as 1933, and no one else will rack up as many titles as he does. In 12 years of power, just look at the variety of his uniforms. President of Prussia, Grand Huntsman of the Reich, Air Minister, Reich Marshal. A display of decorations that sparks the jealousy of his great rival, Joseph Goebbels.
At first, Goebbels is pretty skeptical about Göring's role. He describes him perfectly as an unbearable windbag, puffed up, swollen with conceit and vanity, a vulgar pleasure seeker. Basically, a bore, a nouveau riche who wants flashiness, strutting around in ridiculous uniforms, covered in medals and cords. To him, he's just a puppet.
But Göring is also a tough guy. He sets up the dictatorship as early as 1933. When the Reichstag burns under mysterious circumstances, Göring, the president of the assembly, blames the fire on the communists and gets threatening.
I'm gonna sweep with an iron broom. Everyone who got jobs and privileges solely because of their political ties, red or black, I'm gonna bring them down.
A wave of repression sweeps over Germany. More than 3,000 opponents of Nazism are arrested without trial. Göring creates a new political police force, the Gestapo. By 1933, the first concentration camp opens at Dachau. Opponents are subjected to forced labor. Göring gains points in Hitler's eyes.
Göring is always on the front line when Hitler needs someone to handle a tough job among his associates.
But Joseph Goebbels eventually gets a position tailor-made for him too. A major ministry for propaganda. The frustrated writer now has the power to choose which books are allowed and ban the rest. Books by Jewish writers or authors deemed degenerate are burned in huge public ceremonies. Like this night in May 1933 near Berlin University.
You're right to consign the demons of the past to the flames. The German man of the future, one to just be a man of books, but also a man of character. And that's what we want to train you for.
He's also a fanatical anti-Semite. When the Nazis come to power, Jews make up only 0.8% of Germany's population. But Goebbels comes up with a way to persecute them. Trucks drive through the streets spreading a message.
Let's be German, and let's stop being Jewish. My dear fellow citizens, this morning at 10 a.m., we started the boycott of Jewish businesses.
Stores run by Jews are singled out, and Nazis strongly discourage customers from going in. Goebbels now wants to push his messages on the airwaves. And to get propaganda into every home, he even had a cheap radio made, especially for that. The atmosphere he creates in Germany is especially oppressive for young Margit's family. She's 5 and lives in Berlin. Her father is Jewish, a bookseller, and sells banned books.
I didn't understand everything, but I could feel the atmosphere. We got those people's radios from Goebbels, and I always heard, "The Jews are our misfortune." It was Hitler's voice in Goebbels, and I had absolutely no idea what a Jew was.
Joseph Goebbels keeps an eye on everything. Theater, cinema, and he has newsreels screened by an all-powerful censorship committee. Goebbels also orchestrates a massive staging of the regime. Behind the scenes, he manages every detail. Throughout the 1930s, during huge rallies filmed like a Hollywood blockbuster, Hitler is presented to the people as the Messiah. Joseph Goebbels' career is at its peak, but his tormented nature is about to take over again.
Goebbels is totally in his element in times of crisis, distress, or disaster. But here, he's not comfortable. He needs noise, fury.
For Goebbels, the storm will come from his private life. He married Magda in 1931 with Adolf Hitler as their witness. Over time, their children are used by propaganda. The Goebbels family is the regime's model family.
Dear Daddy, can you see us walking toward you? You've already guessed we're here to congratulate you, because it's your birthday. Helmut.
All 6 children's names start with H as a tribute to Hitler. Magda Goebbels, decorated by the regime, embodies the ideal Nazi mother. And every year, a little scene is staged to celebrate the father's birthday.
Say, Dear Daddy. Quick, say, Dear Daddy. Louder.
We congratulate you. Really? For your birthday. Because you're at work and you don't know what we're doing here.
Joseph Goebbels cultivates this image of a good family man. Like that Christmas night in 1936, when he has himself filmed handing out gifts to the poorest German kids.
Thanks for the little note. You want this?
But the reality is nothing like this perfect image.
Goebbels is known for having lots of affairs. He needs entertainment. He needs action. He needs events. Since he loves movies, knows them well, and has a strong artistic background, he gets involved. One way to get involved in the film world is to hold auditions and say, "Miss, why not tea you come have tea?" He's known as, quoting his nickname in the film industry, the Billy Goat of Babelsberg. Babelsberg is Germany's Hollywood. The studio's near Potsdam, the Billy Goat of Babelsberg.
In 1936, Goebbels starts an affair with the 22-year-old starlet, Lida Borova.
Hello, what's this about? We're going on a trip, right? Today.
It's a misstep that will have consequences for Goebbels' career. To put an end to this scandalous affair, his wife Magda, desperate, threatens to divorce him. She confides in the couple's closest friend, Adolf Hitler.
Hitler doesn't have a family. The German family is Joseph and Magda Goebbels' family. So when that family starts to fall apart, Hitler is not happy at all and forces him to break off the affair and stop humiliating Magda Goebbels, whom Hitler loves as an outstanding German woman and mother. And Hitler is so furious, both for the image and for Magda Goebbels, for whom he has a lot of affection, that he turns away from Goebbels, who suffers for it.
Within Hitler's circle of collaborators, a newcomer will take advantage of this disgrace and achieve a remarkable rise. Albert Speer, though, starts out far from the inner circle, joining Nazism late. In these 1935 images, you can already see their rapport. Hitler sketches, and next to him, in his impeccable suit, stands Albert Speer, 27, a young architect who hasn't built anything yet. In his youth, Hitler himself drew sketches of grandiose buildings, dreaming of seeing them built if he ever came to power. Hitler and Speer have only known each other for a year, but they share a passion for architecture.
Hitler saw in Speer pretty much the life he dreamed of. He always said he wanted to become an architect himself, and Speer adapted to Hitler's demands. Their projects were always gigantic, megalomaniacal.
Hitler noticed Speer on May 1, 1933 at the Berlin airport during Labor Day festivities that drew over 1 million people. a human sea. Hitler is fascinated by the festivities, which end with a grand fireworks display where his face flickers above the crowd. The event is organized by Albert Speer. This upper-class man who just joined the Nazi Party and to whom Goebbels gave his first commissions.
It was Goebbels who introduced Speer to Hitler. But naturally, over time, a rivalry developed. Goebbels always thought it was very important to be part of Hitler's inner circle. And of course, in that case, Speer became a rival.
Very quickly, Speer takes a privileged place at Hitler's side. Unlike Goebbels, he's a permanent guest at Hitler's mountain retreat. Both of them like the same pompous style, inspired by antiquity. First, Speer is the architect of the huge Nuremberg parade ground, modeled on a temple dedicated to Zeus. For party congresses, this esplanade can hold more than 340,000 people. Speer then builds the German pavilion at the foot of the Eiffel Tower for the 1937 Paris World S Fair. That same year, Hitler gives him the commission of the century. Germania, the future capital of his empire. This colossal project is supposed to last until 1950. It's about rebuilding Berlin. Along a 5-kilometer avenue called Victory Avenue, Germania's buildings will be the largest ever designed. At the end, this dome, reserved for the Great Hall of the People, will be 16 times bigger than St. Peter's in Rome, which would still make it the largest building in the world today. For Berliners, it would be like an earthquake.
50,000 apartments would have to be demolished. Nearly 200,000 Berliners would have needed to be relocated, even though there was already a severe housing shortage.
And to test how fast his architect is, Hitler gives him a challenge. Speer has to build Germania's first building in just 1 year. "8,000 workers from all over Germany work day and night at the same time. They're building the future Reich Chancellery. To please Hitler, Albert Speer delivers the building 2 days ahead of schedule. Hitler takes possession of his building, meant to dazzle ambassadors from all over the world. His chancellery is outrageously luxurious, with a marble hall, a huge office for Hitler, and galleries twice as big as those in Versailles. Albert Speer has caught up with all his rivals in Hitler's esteem.
Being close to power fascinated him. Imagine, Speer wasn't even 30, and he was already one of Hitler's most influential advisors.
Meanwhile, in Munich, one of Hitler's longtime accomplices, Himmler, hasn't been given a ministry. He's just named chief of the Bavarian police. Ready for anything, he carries out a bloody purge within the party, known as the quote of the long knives.
It's one of the many steps he took toward power.
At that point, Hitler fears the power of another leader, Ernst Röhm. Very popular, he leads the SA, a powerful Nazi militia recognizable by their brown shirts. While under his command, Himmler oversees the murder of Röhm and his entire staff.
Even if it means bloodshed, if a comrade is in his way, he has no problem with having him eliminated. Even if it means great danger.
And Himmler comes out the big winner from this bloodbath. His organization, the SS, the Black Order, now has no rivals. Himmler can now make it much more than just a militia.
For him, the SS is a real political project, one he managed to convince Hitler of, too.
Himmler worships the Germanic race. He refers to a king who died in the Middle Ages. He goes to pay his respects at his tomb, and he presents Hitler as his successor through history.
1,000 years ago, King Henry I passed on to our Führer Adolf Hitler human values and the role of leader for Germany, for Germania.
Nie dagewesene Größe wieder aufnahm. Unserem Führer Adolf Hitler für Deutschland, für Germanien.
Himmler wants to build a new society, deeply racist, where pure-blooded Germans will be the only masters for centuries to come. And to make sure the blood of the superior race is reproduced on a large scale, Himmler sets up special maternity homes where SS men can leave newborns to be raised by the regime.
It's a bit like controlled horse breeding. You bring your mares to the stables, there are stallions there, they impregnate your mares, and so on.
To create the master race, the Nazis also want to eliminate what they call lives unworthy of life. Starting in 1935, these terrible propaganda films are shown in every cinema. They show disabled people in a terrifying light. The film especially focuses on the cost to society of these patients who spend their whole lives in hospitals. This woman, suffering from a hereditary disease, would cost the community 153,000 marks a year. Her 3 siblings, 62,300 marks. Her epileptic relatives, over 20,000 marks. To sway public opinion, an estimate of over 1.2 billion marks is given as the financial cost of all hereditary diseases. The Nazis want to justify the crimes they're planning.
First, you have to separate and prevent these worthless lives from harming the people. Then, starting in 1939, real killing programs began, especially targeting the physically and mentally disabled.
Himmler never stops wanting to reshape everything. He also wants his SS to have their own beliefs.
I swear here to Adolf Hitler loyalty and bravery.
Strange ceremonies take place in the chapels of Wilsberg Castle, the SS training center, with this black sun as an occult symbol. Baptisms are held according to SS rites. Himmler himself performs weddings. The Nazis want to wipe out all existing religious beliefs.
If the Nazis had won, there would have been a new calendar, new holidays, new rituals, a new baptism, a new celebration that wouldn't have been Christmas. That's also part of the Nazi utopia. A revolution so big and so all-encompassing that it was supposed to change everything, even faith, even God.
In secret, in the mid-1930s, Hitler makes a strategic decision that he first shares with his right-hand man.
Hitler himself sets a plan, saying Germany needs to be ready to go to war in 4 years. And to carry out this plan, he creates a new administration with a 4-year plan chief, Hermann Göring.
Overnight, in 1936, Hermann Göring is put in charge of German industry. His budget is unlimited. His orders mobilize more than 228 factories, a firepower unmatched anywhere in the world at the time. The Germans, deprived of an army since their defeat in World War I, are preparing for revenge.
My dear fellow citizens, my dear brothers in arms, what is the goal of this 4-year plan?
Was ist nun eigentlich der zweite Vierjahresplan?
I could sum it up in one key phrase: the preservation of German honor and the preservation of German life.
Sicherung der deutschen Ehre und die Sicherung des deutschen Lebens.
These new duties also let Göring get rich. For his birthdays, for example, industrialists shower him with gifts. He gets collectible items, but he especially loves master paintings and precious stones. The corrupt system he sets up is well organized.
His office would send company reps little lists, like wedding registries, saying the marshal would like to receive this or that artwork, or this or that object as a gift.
Hermann Göring acts like a Roman emperor. He loves eccentricities, like posing with a lion cub.
Yes, my Caesar. Are you coming to visit me? Are you full, Caesar? Come on, pretty one, jump.
Hitler names Göring as his successor. Since Corinne, his first wife, died of cancer, the Germans have been missing a first lady. So his second wedding in Berlin is fit for royalty. "30,000 soldiers line the route. Hitler, his best man, helped make the wedding a grand spectacle to hide his own private life. Emma and Hermann Göring now embody the regime's official couple. They represent Nazi power more and more at big events, like here at a reception in honor of Mussolini. To entertain, Göring had his huge estate at the gates of Berlin remodeled. Hundreds of artworks cover the walls of this palace.
There were also lots of hunting trophies.
Dieter Wellershoff met Göring several times. Very young, he was drafted into the Hitler Youth. And at 17, he spent a few months as a soldier on Göring's estate.
When he reviewed us, Göring always said, "Once I've walked past you, you can relax." Which meant we didn't have to stand up straight anymore. You had to pick a path with no puddles or mud so this big, heavy man could walk. He was grotesque.
Even if he's front and center, Göring has a hard time keeping Hitler in check. The Führer is now ready to start the war. Hitler regularly attends combat rehearsals. Despite these huge real-life exercises, Göring struggles to rein in his impatience because he knows the plan to prepare Germany for war is behind schedule.
He tells Hitler at that point, you see, Germany ISNT, ready yet.
But a year ahead of his own schedule, Hitler orders the attack.
He lives in a movie, he lives in a play, he's an actor himself, and his war is maps spread out on a giant table, flags moving forward, and pieces he moves around.
For Hitler and his cronies, entering the war in 1939 is shockingly easy. The German army seems unstoppable. After just 1 year of fighting, Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France are invaded. Half of Europe collapses, and dividing up the empire among Hitler's cronies is going to be bloody.
Goebbels runs one administration, Göring another, Himmler another. And you realize that in the politics of conquest, colonization, plundering, and theft, there's a lot of overlap. And all that creates friction and tension.
The great looting begins. Göring makes Paris his hunting ground. He arrives in a convertible limo, cruises the streets, and checks in at a palace, the Ritz, on Place Vendôme. Göring came to help himself in French museums. Matisse, Monet, Cézanne, he grabs hundreds of paintings to add to his massive collection. That same year, Hitler also comes to Paris. Albert Speer, his architect, is by his side. He promises to copy the most beautiful monuments of the French capital for their future Germania.
Hitler was really impressed by Paris. The Champs-Élysées, the Arc de Triomphe. He obviously wanted to recreate all that in Berlin, but on a much bigger scale.
Back in Berlin, Marshal Göring basks in the spotlight. He leads the military operations, but still hides the truth from Hitler.
Of course, from a public point of view, it's a spectacular success. From the economic chief's point of view, it's a disaster. Because after just a few weeks of fighting, Germany has no more bombs, no more ammo, and very few planes.
Afraid to upset Hitler, Göring says nothing. Bragging, he actually promises to crush England in just 3 weeks. Himmler, meanwhile, has carved out an empire in Eastern Europe where he oversees a horrific extermination policy. With total coldness. When Hitler visits him in Poland, his SS soldiers are already waging their big racist war. Himmler spends his time motivating his troops to justify the systematic killings.
What he always tells his SS is that it's hard to bear, like an ordeal, a tough job they have to do. But he says we're strong enough morally.
And he sees it as a kind of sacrifice, saying, I'm sacrificing my psyche so my children can live, and so on. There's a whole narrative behind that.
Starting in 1939 in Poland, then from 1941 in the USSR, the Nazis experiment with mass murder and deportation policies. Under Himmler's orders, they're building their living space, a colonial empire full of slaves, cleared of its Jews.
That project means the deaths of tens of millions of people. We're in a mindset of let them die.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine and the Baltic states, small mobile SS killing squads called Einsatzgruppen are at work. These atrocities happen at a relentless pace. More than 1 million people will be killed by firing squads. In August 1941, Himmler goes to Minsk, Belarus, to see this killing strategy for himself. He first inspects Soviet prisoners, then personally witnesses these executions by shooting.
During a visit to Minsk in summer 1941, Himmler witnesses the execution of 100 Jews. 100 Jews are executed as an example to show Himmler how it's done. Himmler almost faints at the sight. And Himmler is one of the worst anti-Semites of the Third Reich, a rabid, die-hard anti-Semite. It's not out of pity for the Jewish victims, it's just that for the killer, the sight causes trauma.
As unbearable as it may seem, Himmler, as the SS chief, only worries about the psychological trauma for his men.
You've got men who are T-born killers, so you have to get them used to different stages before they'll start killing. After the massacre in Minsk, Himmler asks his men in Berlin to find a method to spare the killers.
In 1941, different mass murder methods are being used side by side. But by the end of the year, an order from Hitler himself will standardize the procedures. He demands the extermination of all the Jews in Europe. 3 years earlier, Hitler had warned, if the war became global, he'd carry out his threat.
Even today, I am a prophet. If international Jewish finance, in Europe and beyond, manages to drag nations into a world war, then the result won't be the Bolshevization of the world. So the victory of Jewry, but instead, it will be the annihilation of the Jewish race.
And it's the US entering the war in December 1941 that finally pushes him to act.
The final solution is decided by Hitler.
At that point, mass executions are happening.
That year, nearly 4 million Jews are exterminated.
For Himmler, it wouldn't be possible to murder millions by mass shootings.
That's why gassing is seen as an efficient solution to protect the killers. Gassing ISNT introduced to kill more people. But gas chambers have one big advantage. They spare the killers. There's no more contact with the victims. You don't even see people die anymore. You just collect the bodies at the end.
Himmler then decides to concentrate all these new extermination policies in one place. A gigantic site that will become the largest concentration and death camp. A place where 1.3 million people will be deported.
First, it has to be a central location in the Nazi Empire. Second, it needs to be well connected to all parts of Europe. And finally, it has to have an extremely fast and efficient killing system. The real railway hub and center of the Nazi Empire that is chosen is Auschwitz.
Himmler puts Auschwitz in the hands of a field official, one of the worst camp specialists. His name is Rudolf Höss. At age 40, he becomes director of one of the Third Reich's biggest projects. These images of Auschwitz we know are from the camp's liberation in 1945 by Soviet soldiers. To run this huge complex, the biggest camp in the Nazi Empire, Heinrich Himmler had several candidates. But he picked Rudolf Höss, a man with a murderer's past.
In 1923, Höss killed a man, a communist, and spent 5 years in prison.
When he got out, Himmler took him under his wing and eventually found him a new job.
In the early 1930s, Himmler went to see my grandfather and suggested he join the SS.
Rainer Höss is the grandson of the Auschwitz commandant. His father, Hans, is Rudolf Höss' youngest son.
He first had a job at Dachau camp. He stayed there 4 years. Then he became head of detention, then deputy director at Sachsenhausen camp. And in 1940, thanks to Himmler, he was directly appointed commandant of Auschwitz.
When he arrives in the town of Auschwitz in 1940 to set up a camp, Höss finds only a small city of 15,000 people and an old Polish army barracks where he sets up the first detention site, Auschwitz I. And he also spots a villa next to the camp. Höss takes over this house, whose Polish owners are expropriated. On the second floor, from his office window, the view over the crematorium doesn't bother him. The commandant moves into the villa with his wife Edwige and their 5 kids. The family only thinks about moving up in society. Their family album photos prove it. Their new living situation brings unexpected comfort. 70 meters from the crematory ovens, the garden surrounded by a high wall becomes the kids' favorite playground.
It was so big they could ride bikes inside. Today, you'd say that back then, my grandparents went from nobodies to VIPs.
Thanks to the concentration camp, the host family lives comfortably, with the workforce reduced to slavery.
He has a prisoner as a gardener, prisoners who serve as house servants, who even take care of the kids if needed. Everything's there for a bourgeois lifestyle at Auschwitz. My grandfather writes in his memoirs, "It was paradise."
Like all SS leaders, Höss is constantly motivated by Himmler, whose arguments were recorded only once for internal use.
Most of you know what 100 corpses looks like, 500 or 1,000 corpses. To have endured in those circumstances and stayed dignified, except for a few cases of human weakness, that made us tougher. It's a glorious page of our history that's never been written and never will be again.
From 1941 on, Himmler orders Höss to make Auschwitz industrial scale, to handle more and more convoys. The old red brick barracks aren't enough anymore. 3 kilometers from the first site, they start building Birkenau, a huge concentration camp, but also a death center, where deportees are sent straight to the gas chambers as soon as they arrive. Höss also uses prisoners to supply labor for a whole industrial complex. A big chemical plant is set up. At the cutting edge of technology for the time, it mainly makes rubber for tires.
The whole Auschwitz complex, the camps, the town, the factories, is a non-stop construction site from 1940 to almost 1945, the end of the war.
Auschwitz keeps expanding its activities. After this huge factory, Höss develops a big farming project with Himmler.
He shares this with Heinrich Himmler, who studied agronomy after 1918, so they have a shared passion.
They oversee the building of these greenhouses to research new plants. From 1943 on, Birkenau camp becomes huge. The new farming hub is set up in a little hamlet, Rejsko. During the war, Auschwitz becomes a model city for the Nazis. The population quadruples. Inside the camp, alongside Rudolf Höss, another major Nazi criminal also benefits from the convoys arriving at Auschwitz. The son of wealthy industrialists, Dr. Josef Mengele conducts medical experiments.
Mengele carries out official research in an official setting, the concentration camp, run in a way. Basically like at the butchers.
In the camp medical services and medical academies, Nazi doctors carried out horrific mutilations, especially on the bodies of Jewish and Roma deportees.
Doctors who were given total power over people who were no longer considered human beings, but as human material on whom they could perform any experiments they thought necessary to advance medicine in one field or another.
Dr. Mengele's experiments, in particular, required children. In this line of young survivors, filmed here in 1945, in the front row, 2 little twin sisters are holding hands. Jewish girls from Hungary, their names are Miriam and Eva, 11 years old at the time.
We were little children, little girls, aged 2 to 16, starving. We had no rights, but a fierce determination to survive one more day.
When she arrived on the platform at Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1944 with her 5 family members, Eva had to undergo the selection by the SS as soon as she got off the train. They received the convoys and worked for Mengele.
A Nazi ran up and shouted in German, "Twins, twins!" He noticed that Miriam and I were dressed the same. He asked my mother if we were twins, and my mother replied, "Is that good for them?"
The Nazi said yes.
Immediately, another Nazi pushed my mother one way and us the other. She was crying, and we were crying.
Stripped of their belongings, 4 members of her family were sent to the gas chamber. If Eva and her sister survived, it was only to be used in Dr. Mengelé's experiments. Every day, they were taken to the camp's medical unit, which he ran.
He would take a little blood from my left arm and give me at least 5 injections a day in my right arm. We didn't know what was in those injections at the time, and unfortunately, I still don't know today.
Those injections made Eva seriously ill and caused a very high fever.
The next day, Dr. Mengele came with 4 other doctors.
Four other doctors?
He didn't examine me, he just looked at my temperature chart and said, laughing sarcastically, "Too bad, she's so young, and she only has 2 weeks left to live."
She has only 2 weeks to live.
Mengelé's experiments on twins, acts of torture, played a strategic role for the Nazis.
At the very heart of Nazi ideology is the idea that Aryan blood is rare and that everything must be done to promote reproduction and allow the Aryan population to grow. So they wanted to find a way to make twins or triplets be born.
They were trying, the older
They tried to mate twins of reproductive age with each other to see if the girl would get pregnant.
female and male twins. To
And if
see
she would have twins herself,
if the female got pregnant, if she would have twins.
they wanted to increase the Aryan race.
In increasing the Aryan race.
Eva and her sister survived, but were left with serious physical disabilities for life. 1.1 million people died at Auschwitz. But starting at the end of 1941, Hitler and his accomplices suffered their first setback. Göring thought that waging war in both the west and east of Europe at the same time was madness. But once again, he didn't stand up to Hitler.
At first, Göring was very skeptical about the offensive to the east. And then he quickly realized that apparently Hitler had made up his mind. And that's the rule for Göring. If Hitler made a decision, it's his job to obey orders.
But Göring was the one who was right. Facing the USSR, the German army hadn't prepared for the freezing winter. The troops were exhausted. In front of Stalingrad, the losses were huge. At that time, young Dieter went from the Hitler Youth to the Russian front, where he fought in the Hermann Göring division. The young soldier was only 17.
What I learned from the adults there was that Göring had a different opinion from Hitler. He didn't want the war, and during a conversation with Hitler, Göring said, "We don't want to play a game of chance." Hitler replied, "I've always only played games of chance."
Fighting on multiple fronts, the Germans lacked the weapons they needed. But Hitler wouldn't listen to anything. He looked for someone in his inner circle who could promise him a miracle. Göring, who had already run the arms industry, volunteered. But Hitler preferred a more motivated collaborator. He chose his architect, Albert Speer.
Hitler told him, "You must become Minister of Armaments." Speer said he had no training in that field. Hitler insisted, saying, "You'll do it." So he accepted the job. Without Speer, the war wouldn't have lasted as long. The Reich Minister for Armaments and War Production, Albert Speer, visiting a major arms company, thanked the workers for their investment in the incredible increase in production.
Hitler asked him to double production rates. But right from the start, Speer saw the problem was complicated. The men were sent to the front. Women replaced them in the arms factories. Propaganda even encouraged them to leave their previous jobs.
This worker was, until recently, a seamstress in a fashion salon. This one, a saleswoman in a jewelry store. This one, a saleswoman in a perfume shop.
But even that wasn't enough to meet the outrageous targets set by Hitler. On top of that, Speer was put in charge of developing secret weapons that were supposed to turn the tide of the war. Notably, the V1 and V2 missiles, which had been in testing for over 5 years. These were the first ballistic missiles in history, supposedly able to hit England. Against all odds, Speer pulled off a miracle. While the country was being bombed in 1943, like here in Hamburg, he managed to double arms production. Cannons and tanks were assembled on production lines in huge factories, where workers put in over 70 hours a week. But his miracle also had a dark side.
Because of Allied bombings, city centers were destroyed, and some industrial sites too. That S when the idea came up to move production underground.
In central Germany, in a forested region 150 kilometers from Hanover, a massive project was buried under this hill. The Nazis planned a network of tunnels over 12 kilometers long, running through the entire Mittelbau-Dora mountain. You enter through this huge entrance, 7 meters high. The old mine is a never-ending series of tunnels. This labyrinth has 45 galleries. It's the largest underground factory in the world, where workers assembled the famous V2 missiles. But it was also the heart of the system, organized by Albert Speer. Thousands of deportees from concentration camps were locked up there day and night, forced to work as slaves. Of the 60,000 prisoners in the tunnels, 20,000 would die there, including more than 2,000 French. Albert Speer always claimed he knew nothing about these barbaric living conditions that made his miracle possible. Hitler considered him a genius of organization. He decorated him. Speer's ambition irritated his rivals.
Speer managed to use the camp system for the arms industry. We know that, besides Hitler, Himmler especially feared one rival. That was Speer, because he always managed to win over Hitler.
But Speer's miracle wasn't enough. The news coming from the Russian front was getting worse and worse for the Germans. 200,000 soldiers were taken prisoner. Göring now physically bore the weight of defeat. His drug use skyrocketed. Bloated, glassy-eyed, he weighed over 120 kilos.
He felt useless. It was a personal crisis. And during this crisis, he tried to calm himself with morphine-based drugs or other things. That S, when people started mocking him more and more. And it wasn't just the German public, but also Hitler, who became more and more critical.
Yet, on the Eastern Front, when Marshal Göring inspected the panzer division named after him, all the soldiers still had to pretend to believe in victory. Among the fighters in that unit was young Dieter.
We all knew among ourselves that the war was lost. We could only think it, we couldn't say it out loud. If anyone said, the war is lost and it's all over, they'd have been shot.
To fight this loss of motivation, Hitler needed a collaborator who could rally the Germans behind him. It was time for his most fanatical accomplice to step back into the spotlight. Berlin Sports Palace, February 18, 1943. Goebbels staged a PR operation. He gathered a crowd of die-hard Nazis, but also wounded soldiers returning from the front. He carefully selected his 14,000 spectators.
The English claim that the German people are against our government's total war measures. According to the English, the people don't want total war. They want surrender. I ask you, do you want total war?
He whipped up a climate of hysteria in Germany.
Do you want this war to be so total and so radical that we can even imagine it? I ask you, are you determined to follow the Führer into hell to achieve victory, even if it means enduring the hardest personal trials?
That night, Goebbels, in a trance, pulled off what he considered the most successful performance of his career. Germany must sacrifice itself to the last man. Germany will never surrender.
Goebbels was smart enough to realize the situation was tough, maybe even hopeless. If victory was possible, it would be thanks to energy, willpower, and a sense of sacrifice. If defeat was inevitable, well, the Nazis would disappear with such noise, such chaos, such an apocalypse, that at least they'd immortalize themselves through their sacrifice.
Une telle apocalypse, que du moins ils s'immortaliseront par leur sacrifice.
His eternal rival Göring was finally disgraced. He returned to the spotlight. Goebbels then showed extraordinary energy. He visited bombing victims, listened to complaints, handed out medals, and toured soup kitchens.
He would fully return to the forefront, like a sort of vice Hitler, basically a second Hitler, thanks to the catastrophe.
Goebbels also widened the age for mobilization for all Germans. Men were now drafted up to age 60, and the minimum age was lowered to just 16.
Since the Allies were getting closer, I decided to enlist.
The new recruits went to the front in their everyday clothes, with whatever weapons they had. Goebbels gave the operation a name: People's Storm. But in ruined Berlin, where people had to dig through garbage to eat, yet another piece of news would shake the Nazis' morale. In Normandy, the Allies had just landed. Day by day, the collapse of the Reich was looming. Little Margit was living in hiding in Berlin. To escape the Nazis, her Jewish father fled to China. And from her hiding place, in July 1944, the little girl regained hope when she heard some news on the radio.
Oh my God. But on July 20th, 1944, there was the assassination attempt on Hitler. And you know what I heard first on the radio? It was Hitler's voice saying, "Providence saved me." And it had saved him.
In this completely devastated room of his headquarters, Hitler miraculously survived a bomb attack. Around him, there were 4 dead and 9 seriously wounded, whom he visited in the hospital. The attack was organized by high-ranking officers who wanted to negotiate Germany's surrender with the Allies. This plot against Hitler triggered thousands of arrests, tortures, and murders. Speer, Himmler, Göring, Goebbels. Now they all knew what they'd risk if they betrayed him. But they would make very different choices. These accomplices were all supposed to follow their Führer, even to the point of sacrificing their lives. Now they were trapped by Hitler, who had lost his grip on reality. By March 1945, they were just going through the motions. In these propaganda images, he sits in front of a map and in front of generals paralyzed with fear, who don't dare mention defeat.
He dominated them, shut them up, scolded them, yelled at them. But in spring 1945, he was moving little flags and pieces that no longer existed.
On April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th birthday, it was the last time they were filmed together. Göring and Himmler paraded, everyone apparently smiling, but it was just an illusion. A few hours later, they hurriedly abandoned Hitler.
Göring learned that Hitler had decided not to leave Berlin. Göring left for southern Germany, he fled.
Because at that point, staying in Berlin meant dying. Soviet soldiers were pounding the city with bombs. In a bunker under the massive chancellery, of the three main accomplices, only Goebbels stayed holed up with Hitler.
If it led to suicide, death, defeat, it didn't matter. Because Dr. Goebbels, chief propagandist, would have staged this death so that for centuries, the myth of this death, this sacrifice, this disappearance would echo.
As the empire collapsed, Joseph Goebbels, the fanatic, gave the Germans one last radio message on April 21st.
The moment of truth is coming. I'm staying in Berlin with my entire cabinet. My wife and kids are here too, and they're staying in Berlin.
As the city falls to the Soviets, on April 30th, 1945, at 3 p.m., Hitler kills himself. According to his last wishes, he names Joseph Goebbels as his official successor. But Goebbels is only chancellor for a few hours. When the Soviets reach the gardens of the chancellery, they find the charred bodies of Joseph and Magda Goebbels, along with the bodies of their 6 children, whom they poisoned before killing themselves.
With Magda Goebbels, his wife, they agreed there was no future, no possible world without Nazism. So they murdered their children, wiping out the next generation. It's over.
All over Germany, the Allies find the same scene. Thousands of anonymous Nazis refuse to surrender and kill themselves with their families. Unlike Goebbels, Himmler and Göring are ready to negotiate.
Himmler and Göring stay politicians to the end, meaning they're people who keep all options open, calculating, wanting to survive.
Hermann Göring took refuge at his estate on the German-Austrian border. Before he died, Hitler dismissed him. The Führer had named him as his successor. So on April 23, 1945, Göring sent him this confidential telegram, offering to take his place.
If negotiations are needed, I'll be in a better position than you in Berlin. There, he asks Hitler, if you can make decisions anymore, it's up to me now to take over.
Hitler saw this telegram as a serious betrayal.
And that's why Göring was stripped of all his positions.
In the end, in May 1945, Göring surrendered to the Americans. His wife and daughter are kept under close watch. Göring still believes he can negotiate an honorable surrender. He's a marshal, the highest military rank, but he's told he'll be treated as a criminal.
He realizes, minute by minute, that he has no chance to negotiate anything, since the Allies have demanded unconditional surrender for years.
Hitler was also betrayed by his loyal follower, Heinrich Himmler. The SS chief is on the run since February 1945, trying to save his own skin. Himmler secretly contacted the Allies to negotiate surrender. He even allowed his white Red Cross buses to save over 13,000 prisoners, freeing them from the camps.
Himmler played a double game at the end of the war, negotiating behind Hitler's back with the Allies. You can see how out of touch with reality he was. He really thought the Allies were ready to accept him as a power broker.
When he realizes he's not credible, Himmler hides among ordinary German soldiers taken prisoner. He tries to disappear into the crowd, disguised under a false identity. He's finally recognized near Hamburg, and when he's searched in this house by a British doctor, Himmler bites down on a cyanide capsule, the poison he'd hidden in his mouth. He dies instantly. The century's greatest murderer will never be held accountable.
He wanted to escape responsibility, not just by running, but also by killing himself, to avoid facing a judge.
That same day in Flensburg, northern Germany, the last Nazi leaders are arrested. Among them is Hitler's protege, Albert Speer, the architect and armaments minister. By summer 1945, among Hitler's inner circle, only Göring and Speer are still alive. Lower down the ranks, Höss also survived. They'll have to answer for their crimes before the judges. They still think they might get out alive. In Nuremberg, on November 20th, 1945, the trial of the century begins. These American, British, Russian, and French judges must try the 24 top surviving Nazi criminals. All of them face the death penalty. And for the first time in history, they'll have to answer for a new crime. Crimes against humanity. Defendant number 1 is Hermann Göring. Slimmer, cured of his drug addiction, he feels especially combative.
He was really in top shape at that point. He really saw this trial as a fight.
Hermann Wilhelm Göring.
From the start of the trial, Göring tries to take charge. Under American procedure, the accused are only supposed to plead guilty or not guilty. But he prepared a long speech.
Before answering the court, whether I'm found guilty or not guilty,
Beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne.
The presiding judge calls him to order.
I must inform you that the defendants are not allowed to make statements.
Defendants were not entitled to make.
You must simply plead, guilty or not guilty.
You must plead guilty or not guilty.
On these charges, I plead not guilty.
After him, all the other defendants pled not guilty too. Not guilty!
Nicht schuldig. Nicht schuldig.
During the trial, Göring is the center of attention. He still thinks his strategy will save him from the death penalty. He wants to defend Hitler's vision for Germany.
His idea at that point was really to justify his Führer.
But the judges had a shock in store. The Nazi criminals are forced, right in court, to face the unbearable footage shot at the liberation of the camps. Footage filmed by Americans and Russians to bear witness forever to the atrocities organized by the accused. During the screening, Göring looks away. He realizes his defense is collapsing.
Given what is on screen, he had almost no chance of succeeding with his plan to explain or justify what happened over those 12 years in Germany.
The chilling testimony of Rudolf Höss, Auschwitz camp commandant will further incriminate the accused. Sure, the prisoners were treated harshly, but with a certain method. Right to the end, they defend the Nazi regime. But at Nuremberg, only one will renounce his beliefs and claim he knew nothing about the Holocaust. And that, one of Hitler's closest, Albert Speer, the architect.
Hitler and the collapse of his regime set up a terrible period of suffering for the German people. After this trial, I'm going to condemn Hitler as the one responsible for all this misery.
He claims he always kept his distance from Hitler. He even says he considered killing him. Of course, that's ridiculous.
On October 1st, 1946, after 10 months of the Nuremberg trial, the verdict is delivered.
Defendant Hermann Wilhelm Göring, the International Tribunal, sentences you to death by hanging.
12 defendants are sentenced to death by hanging. Speer's strategy worked. He gets only 20 years in prison. Göring doesn't want to be hanged like a common criminal, but to die like a soldier, shot by a firing squad. The court refuses. So, as a final act of defiance, a few hours before his sentence is carried out, with the help of one of his American guards, Göring gets a poison capsule and kills himself in his cell, still convinced he'll leave his mark on history.
He explained, "Now they're going to condemn me, but in 50 years, you'll see, there'll be little Hermann Göring statues in every German home."
The Auschwitz officials are handed over to Polish justice, since the atrocities happened on Polish soil. Among them is Rudolf Höss, the camp director. He's tried in Warsaw and, as an example, sentenced to be hanged at the camp at the scene of his crimes.
It's chilling to see how cold he was. He never really showed any remorse for his murders. To him, he was just following orders.
Years go by. In Hitler's inner circle, only one survived, and he became a master of deception. When he leaves Spandau prison in Berlin-esque suburbs in 1966, Albert Speer is only 61. Hitler's architect and minister draws media from all over the world. After 20 years in prison, he's the only one who can tell from the inside how power worked under Hitler.
When Speer got out of prison, he'd already signed a very lucrative contract to write his memoirs. For 2 years, Albert Speer has been a best-selling author. His memoirs, written in prison, have been translated into 14 languages and sold over 1 million copies.
He's a star. Speer is interviewed on TV shows all over the world.
Why did Hitler himself make you one of his friends? Hitler never had any friends. And I said at the Nuremberg trial that if Hitler had had friends, I was one of them. Maybe I fulfilled his childhood dream.
He keeps presenting himself as an architect who knew nothing about the regime's worst crimes.
According to him, he knew nothing about the extermination of the Jews.
But in the 1970s, Speer was gradually caught up by revelations about his role in the Holocaust. Notably, thanks to this photo, we know he visited the Mauthausen camp in 1943, where over 200,000 people died, and that he heard Himmler talk about exterminating the Jews.
If we'd known everything we know today, he would have been sentenced to death at Nuremberg. He was a very dangerous man. Behind a bourgeois mask, he hid his true nature as a cold politician.
Albert Speer managed to dodge the truth to the very end. Hitler's last close associate dies in his bed of a heart attack in 1981. Joseph Mengele, the Auschwitz doctor known as the Angel of Death, dies in Brazil in 1979, never having faced justice. None of these major criminals who worked so hard for Hitler has a grave today. Their ashes were scattered or their bodies buried anonymously to prevent any gathering of sympathizers. Their traces are slowly disappearing. At the end of this path lost in the forest, with no sign, these abandoned ruins are what is left of Adolf Hitler's favorite house, where all his accomplices used to meet.